All right, well, welcome back, everybody. If you're just joining us, we are discussing the question, what is marriage? For those of you who are, like I said, are just tuning in, I'm going to give a brief recap of what we've already covered. Marriage equality, we learned that is a completely vacuous statement. It does not mean what the propaganda would sort of want you to think that it means, right? Marriage equality simply means that we would like the law to treat all marriages equally. Okay? But that doesn't answer this question about what is marriage. So here we're kind of fleshing it out, seeing the different natures, the different purposes that each of these visions is going to potentially serve in society. Right? Each of these visions, I think it's important to realize that the law will not be neutral when it favors one of these visions, right? There's no merger, there's no middle ground. It's either going to be one or the other. And that is why I believe that it is important to continue to talk about the consequences of redefining marriage, right? I think a lot of times we're having trouble today in understanding what marriage is because we never understood what it was. You know, I use this saying quite a bit. It's like if you're going to take down a fence, understand why you put it up in the first place, right? And so my generation, maybe even our parents' generation, are somewhat at fault to blame as to why we don't understand what values, virtues, pledges that the original version had. It kind of helps us give a bearing to see where we are going concerning this new view. So like I said, these are both of the views that are on the table of debate today. The consent-based view, the comprehensive view, also known as natural marriage. The consent-based view is distinguished because it is the number one relationship in your life. It gets its uniqueness, I guess you could say, from because it is the most emotionally charged, most romantically charged relationship in your life. It has everything that every other relationship could potentially have, just more of it, right? It is not distinguished by the kind of relationship, rather the degree. And because it rests on that definition, it cannot explain why government is interested in the intense emotional companion business, right? Government historically has never been interested in the love lives of people, and because this definition of marriage is now legalized, it has virtually expanded government authority across all borders in ways that we have never known it to before. Putting the government, putting what was private, putting it on a political stand, I guess you could say, right? Government will exist in every bedroom that whose household has love is love, essentially, right? So also this vision of marriage does not recognize any of the historical features that the comprehensive view has provided us already. Features like monogamy, a vow of permanence, and sexual exclusivity, right? And this is problematic because this is not simply an expansion of the old definition. An expansion would imply that you're building off the old definition. You know, this revision of marriage has no principle within its own nature to require adults to live a monogamous, permanent, and exclusive life. Why? Because consenting adult relationships come in all sort of shapes, sizes, forms, as consent does, right? So it will last, in principle, as long as the love lasts. And so, it prioritizes adult desire and romance over family life and children. Again, I know it's a bold statement. It'll make more sense once I cover this part. This view of marriage, comprehensive view, the natural view, is it gets its distinction from a union that is formed by the heart, mind, and body. Most of your friends, colleagues, peers, so on, will be a heart-mind relationship. The marital union will include the body, right? That's why sex, right, to consummate the marriage is called the marital act, because that is something that marriage then appropriates sexual behavior or sexual activity, right, for marriage alone, for the husband and wife. Those are things that the impression it leaves on people, that children belong in families, and how do we get the children? It's kind of self-explanatory, right? Government is interested in this relationship because out of all the combinations of human interactions, only the man and a woman can produce a child. That becomes a public consequence. The child becomes a public consequence, and society has to answer whose child is it and who will be left to raise the child, right? And so we know that when this relationship, the man-woman relationship, after it has produced a child, we know when that malfunctions, right, that social costs run high. So marriage, the institution of marriage, arose out of something that happened naturally between men and women, and it tried to secure as best as it can the man to the woman, and those two who are making those two who are responsible for creating the child also responsible for raising the child, right? This vision of marriage is built from the perspective of the child, saying, like we're asking, what is marriage? You're also asking, which way should the rights protect? Should the rights protect the child, and in doing so, saying that every child has the right to their biological and mother and father, or do the rights protect the adults, to say that adults should have essentially free choice to, that's really as far as it goes, to have free choice. That adult desire now is, like I said, becomes a priority with government assistance. Okay, so what I want to focus on for this video is this union of hearts, minds, and bodies, and what makes this marriage natural, and how this works. This is a self-sustaining institution, the natural marriage, as compared to the consent-based view, where this is a complete creation of the state, right? So in order to unite spouses on every level of their humanity, of their personhood, we have to understand what an individual is, right? So we are complete within our individual humanity, in every biological function except one, right? With respect to my blood circulation, I don't need any outside help. I can do that completely on its own. My body takes care of that for me. With respect to digestion, the same thing. With respect to, my locomotion, these sort of things. Like I don't need anybody to help me out. My body completely serves me. How can I say this? My body completely does that for me. Like I said, I don't need any help. But I do need help when it comes to procreation, right? I need help, in my particular case, from a woman. So this right here is based on the biological fact that a man and a woman have the procreative power. within, like I said, within themselves. So when you look at the nature of just an individual's biology, we can see that biology is ordered toward the good of that individual, right? It is the good of that continued life. And if that is the orderedness, how my biology is oriented towards, then that must be true for procreation too. And so we see in this view of marriage that the love-making act also becomes the life-giving act. How we consummate this vision of marriage, right? What transforms, the act that transforms a husband and wife is also the same act that can transform them to become a mother and a father, right? So this is what this vision of marriage is naturally, inherently, right, ordered towards. It truly does form a two and one flesh union, as the Bible says. It is not like me sticking my finger in your ear, right? That serves no biological function. But when a man and woman come together, they have the potential to create new life. They complete each other. They fit together like a machine, right? And so we say that is a right way of humans interacting among one another, and that this institution arose out of something that happens naturally among men and women, right? Okay, so just to give a short summary about the basis for this vision of marriage, Ryan Anderson from the Heritage Foundation concludes that it is based in the anthropological truth that men and women are distinct and complementary, the biological fact that a man and woman are required for reproduction, and the social reality that children deserve a mother and a father, right? So, what's the big deal? Moving on to the second segment of this series of living out the truth of marriage. Why does marriage matter? Right? Why does marriage matter? Okay, so let's really try to break this down. Okay, when a child is born, the child will always be birthed by a woman, right? The mother is always close by. The question is, who is the father to the child, and how long is that father going to stay in that family, right? So marriage becomes then an institution that protects not only the child, but also protects the woman. Okay? It maximizes the likelihood that father commits permanently and exclusively to raise that child, right? And so, like I said earlier, when this does not happen, the social costs run high. Marriage protects children from poverty, protects them from committing crime. It gives them an increased chance of social mobility, right? Also, it prevents the state from picking up the pieces in the form of a welfare program or a police program, right? Okay, so why else does marriage matter? It matters because the child does not recognize this term parenting, right? Parenting is sort of abstract. It doesn't. What happens is, in the social sciences, there's no such thing as parenting. There is only mothering and fathering, right? Children do not recognize parenting. They recognize mothering and fathering. That's how they internalize, the world around them, right? And so we know that gender matters, and it matters to everyone. When there's a case of an absentee mother or an absentee father in the family, we know that gender matters because the son and the daughter will react differently if either the mother or the father is not in the house, right? So let's say for most instances it's not, the father is not in the house, so the children live with the mother. because the father's gone, the daughter is going to react differently than the son would. So we know that gender matters for the children, right? It also matters on a very practical level. Let's say you're about to have a baby, right? When you leave the hospital, you don't want to leave with a baby. You want to leave with your baby, right? It would seem crazy that to not have some sort of concern about if I'm leaving the hospital and if this is my child or not, right? And if that is true for the parents, how much more true is it for the child? I've read in instances of adoption agencies, right? They're very well aware of this truth. If a biological mother is going to have to place her child in adoption, right? It is important that that mother hold that child for, I think it's like an hour after birth, because if that child is introduced to this world by an unfamiliar voice, an unfamiliar touch, I can't really get into the specifics of that. That's not my area of expertise. It's somewhat miraculous for me to think about, though. But that child could grow up with abandonment issues, and so adoption agencies are well aware of this. They would like for the biological mother to hold her child, to talk to her child before she gives them over to the adoption agency, right? So that matters. It also matters for the same-sex couple, right? A lot of times you'll hear same-sex couples say stuff like, well, in this vision of marriage, this is a genderless institution, right? So you'll say that gender does not matter for child rearing, but for some reason it absolutely matters when the same-sex couple is choosing a lover to enter into the institution of marriage, right? Also, role modeling. Like I said, we talked about mothering and fathering. Well, let's just take fathers, for instance, for the sake of time. A father is a guide to a son, helps him guide his masculinity in a more constructive way, right? He helps him mature from malehood to manhood. If I were to say, like, let's do this thought experiment, and you're observing a parent in a living room playing with their son, and this parent and this child are roughhousing and wrestling and tackling, and the parent is constantly reminding the child, hair pulling and shirt ripping and these sort of things. It can be fun, but we have to learn to play nicely. If I were to ask you which parent was in the room, more likely you're going to say the father, right? And that's not because mothers can't do these sort of things, that they naturally, that's just not something that they do. They're more of the caregiving, nurturing, type of person. That's more true to their nature. Rather, this is something that comes more naturally to fathers, right? So that 5-year-old son, 5 years later, let's say that family goes out on a picnic, right, or a camping trip, playing catch in the backyard. 5 years later, that child is asking the father how to ask, how to ask a girl on a date to go to prom, something like that. You know what I'm saying? We know that sort of thing matters, because when the father is present, he is helping guide the son, like I said, through masculinity, helping channel his aggressions in a way, because if the child does not learn that biting and shirt ripping and punching and these sort of things are unacceptable at the age of 5, and he hasn't mastered them at 10, well, by the age of 15, that can take a criminal route in a hurry, right? So the father absolutely matters in that boy's life. The father also does something distinct and yet complementary for his daughters, right? He kind of helps police his daughter's relationships. The father was once a young boy. He understands what the sort of wrong, kind of the bad dates, you know what I'm saying? Where, how can I say this? He just helps police the daughter's relationships, right? And he also role models for the daughter what sort of healthy relationship she should be looking for, and sort of characteristics and traits she should be looking for within a husband. The father role models what a good marriage should look like for the daughter, right? And so, like I said, when the father is absent, the two, the son and daughter, they react differently. They respond differently. And so I'm going to read you this quote, and you can tell me who it is, right? So we know the statistics that children who grow up without a father are 5 times more likely to commit crime, 9 times more likely to drop out, 20 times more likely to go to prison. They are more likely to have behavioral problems and run away from home or become teenage parents themselves, and the foundations of our community are weaker because of that. Right? That was a quote by President Obama, right? And so it's not to say that children who grow up without a father are somehow just destined and doomed for failure in life. Okay, President Obama grew up without a father, and he seems to be, he's the president of the United States currently right now, right? So, but social science doesn't sort of like work in that reliable way. Like if I were to drop, the marker, every time it's going to fall to the ground. It's not like the laws of physics. Social sciences work on a grid that is like on average and for the most part. So we see that children who grow up in a single parent home, no, not all of them are going to, end up in prison, commit crimes, and do these sort of things. But that is to say that they have a tougher road to walk. And so it's how are we going to show in the law that fathers are essential rather than optional, right? And that's not to say that that single mothers do a bad job of raising their kids, right? Single mothers many times are the most heroic figures in a child's life, and they're doing an outstanding job taking care of their families without the help of the father, right? Many times you will hear even the testimony that those single mothers wish that the father would have stayed in the picture, right? And that's not to critique anybody's situation, but that is to say that marriage matters. All right? I'm going to cut it there and start the next video. And we'll be discussing more of the norms from the consent-based view, now that I believe I have belabored the point of the comprehensive and the natural view of marriage.